Hey YouTube, this is Itachi13, aka 13 Dragon Blade, coming at you with a new segment. This is going to be called The Cards That Nobody Pays Attention To, or for short, Epic Cards, as I like to put it. My friend told me to have that title. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but enjoy the video. First card we're going to cover is Boganon. Everybody is like, what the heck is this thing? Well, it's one of Merrick's cards in the show. It's a decent card. It inflicts 600 during your opponent's your standby phase. It inflicts 600 to your opponent. What I find funny about this card is that it laughs at Valor because it's like, oh, not in the main phase, so you can't drop your Valor. Anyway, I've seen this teched in some Final Countdown decks to put pressure on the opponent. But if you really wanted to put pressure, run Stealth Bird. Does 1,000 each time he's flipped, and unless they have Valor, it's a pain in the butt. But that's actually the reason why my friend runs it. My friend actually runs 3 of these in his Final Countdown deck. Because he says, what more fun than to stall them with this? Because then they have to hit this guy, which he really can care less about. And it inflicts 600. If you have 3 on board, because he uses it for a Reckless Summon, he gives his opponent 3 monsters, then chains Threatening Roar to that. So they have no battle phase, and then he can inflict 600 times 3, which is 18 each turn. So within the midst of 6 turns, he'll probably kill his opponent without having to worry about Final Countdown. It's just a fairly good card. It's not really super good. I mean, for God's sakes, it only has 1,300 attack. Same thing with this thing. 1,400 attack. But it's still a very overlooked card. But when I read its effect, I was like, oh, this guy can screw with heroes. I used this on a hero player one time, and he's like, what the heck is that? I'm like, Fusion Drawer. It's got 1,400 attack. And say, oh, cool. Absolute Zero. Or, not Absolute Zero. I'm trying to remember. Nova Master. Bash it. I'm like, cool. Its attack becomes 0, and it dies. And he looked at me and he's like, what the hell? I'm like, yeah, this card's kind of annoying. It gets under Bottomless, which is good. And as long as it battles a fusion monster, that fusion monster's attack becomes 0 during the damage step. So basically, you can just fend off almost any fusion they have except for Absolute Zero, because Absolute Zero is a dick. And everything else is just good about him. I mean, he's not a bad card, he's just very overlooked. Kind of like this one. When Synchros were big, I actually sided this into Synchro-heavy decks, and I watched and laughed. Every time my opponent would Synchro Summon, if I get a direct attack on this guy, basically what he does is his effect is actually quite amazing. When he inflicts battle damage to your opponent by direct attack, you banish all of their Synchros in their graveyard and inflict 1,000 for each. Very good card. So we had an anti-fusion and an anti-synchro. Yeah, good card, good card. 2,000 attack, 1 tribute. Kinda but it's not terrible. And then this card was also overlooked. Freed, the Matchless General. I remember back in the day people would use this to have another Rhoda, because Rhoda was at 3 at one point, and everybody was like, okay, we have to put that card at 1. Well, we have this card. It's a very overlooked card. I've even seen some hero decks that still run this, and that surprises me because I only ran this before when I had my old hero deck. Back when, of course, Sunmass Stark didn't exist, but still, good card. It's a 23 beater. It is a 1,700 defender, so it's not terrible, but what its effect is pretty good. Spell cards that target him automatically get negated and destroyed. And instead of doing your normal draw phase, you can search for a level 4 or lower warrior-type monster from your deck to your hand, which is really, really good. And then we have this guy who's very overlooked. His name is Photon Cerberus. Photon Cerberus' effect is actually quite good. He's normal summoned. Neither player can activate trap cards while this card's face up on the field. In a beast deck that can beef this guy up, and of course use Horn of the Phantom Beast, which is a very broken card for this thing, just chain it to Horn of the Phantom Beast. It becomes a beater automatically, and then it can run over stuff, giving you cards, and still having your opponent having to waste, because it's basically a Royal Decree on legs. So it gets annoying to deal with having to attack this thing, and of course it's an honest target, so if you don't really want it to be a douche, you would run 3 of it, and an honest. And then a card that not a lot of people really paid attention to is Vortex Trooper. I don't even remember this guy's name. Anyway, when he's normal summoned, you shuffle 2 cards from your hand into your deck, and you draw 2 cards. So it's a half Magical Mallet, and when you discard, you draw a card. So you would think, why would not anybody run this? Well, its attack is 0, and its defense is 600. There's your answer. I've seen some Dragoonity decks and some other decks run it just as a tech card, because they can protect themselves. I mean, hell, even Final Countdown uses, Exodia uses on this, because it's nice to set this card, have him die, and then just give you a card. Either way, it's still a pretty good card when he's normaled or just set. Then we have Blizzard Dragon. Blizzard Dragon's alright. It's not a great card, but it's still pretty good. It's an 18-beater, level 4, Dragon-type water monster that can freeze a monster, and it cannot change its battle position. So you target one monster your opponent controls, it cannot attack and change its battle position until your opponent's next end phase, which is actually quite annoying to deal with, and it's a stall card, basically. And then Elector. Elector, the Surveying of Birds. It's a good card, 24-beater. You can special summon it when your opponent has 2 monsters with the same attribute that are face-up. And basically, it negates cards. Target a face-up card, negate its effects during this turn. It's 24-beater, really good, decent win monster. I mean, hell, I've seen some Gusto decks run it too. Just kind of funny to me. And then Goyo went to cook some pollo, because this card was banned immediately. As soon as after I got it, actually, it kind of pissed me off. I'm like, I just got Goyo Guardian. Yeah, now I can use it. And it's like, oh, nope, he's banned. I'm like, you serious? But I can see why. For a level 6, he's a 28-beater. He can steal your opponent's monsters. As if that weren't enough, he can be made in several decks, because he just has 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner monster. So, good card, but he got banned immediately. Now we're going to go into the spells, because there's very little bit. A Traffic Control. It's a fairly new card. It's another stall card. When your opponent controls 3 monsters that cannot declare an attack, it's pretty viable to them. You just say no. You can use this in burn decks, you can use this in Final Countdown, any type of stall deck that you want. It's a pretty good card, like I said. It just helps stall your opponent for those OTK pushes. And this card that used to be in the side deck that often, but now I wonder where did it go? Nobleman of Crossout was good, and so was Nobleman of Extermination, which are both very good cards. It basically just says no. It removes a face-down monster. And your opponent and you search your deck if you have that same flip effect monster and banish it as well. So basically it just says no. But unless you're facing worms or if you're facing a flip deck, it's not really necessary to you. Same reason behind Pot of Benevolence. Pot of Benevolence is a decent card. The only reason why people don't like this card is because you can't reuse it. But then again, giving you 2 random cards back into your deck is not enough. Using Pot of Benevolence is actually quite simple. You just use it, and if I believe, yeah, you select 2 cards from the graveyard, and it says graveyards, so you can target your opponent, and you can put it back into their deck. And then after this is done, you remove it instead of sending it to the graveyard, and you can only activate it once per turn. So it's basically the equivalent of Pot of Duality if it wasn't stupid, because Pot of Duality is kind of stupid. And then for traps, we have Seven Tools of the Bandit. Very old, yet good card. It negates a trap by paying 1,000. A lot of people still run it. Some people don't really run it because they prefer the Solemn Brigade. So, in my opinion, good card. Cashback. This is a card just to say no to any of the Solemns. It's a fairly new card, and it puts it back into their deck, which is hilarious. Anyways, YouTube, this is Itachi13 signing off, part 1 of cards nobody really pays attention about.